What's good, everyone? Matt here from UK Nets Fans, and I'm joined, as ever, by Aidan McConaughey and Cammy Anderson for another episode of BK to UK, the British Brooklyn Nets podcast. Today is Monday, the 15th of November, and today we're chatting about some classic edition merch dropping today, recapping this past week's games against the Bulls, Magic, Pelicans, and Thunder, and much, much more besides. Make sure you're following us on Twitter and Instagram at UK Nets Fans, the pod itself on Twitter at BK2UK Pod, and check us out on YouTube where you can watch back all of our episodes. With that out of the way, let's get into it. And for those of you watching along on Twitch or Twitter or YouTube, you can see that I'm dropping the ABA Days jersey because this week, today, actually, as we record, the Classic Edition collection has dropped. Obviously, we touched on the jersey a little bit last week, where it made its on-court debut. But gents, I don't know, Christmas is just around the corner. I don't know if you are like me and you've just dropped hints, or if you have been splashing the cash already. But has there been any particular items as part of that collection that have caught the eye?
Yeah, there's loads of stuff that's caught my eye, but yeah, no, it just seems to get more and more expensive with every single drop that comes out. They seem to add an extra £10 or $10 onto it. But for me, I love the courtside jacket that they've released, like the really kind of baggy old style one. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a courtside jacket that we're going to see often worn by the Nets because it looks really, really thick. And some of those arenas can get pretty hot, so I don't think they'll be wearing that. But here in Scotland, it's certainly come in handy, but I think it's coming in at about £180, $220 or something like that. So, yeah, maybe for the Christmas list, but not sure if I can swing that one. But I did see as well, they had a City Edition Wilson basketball, which was really, really cool. But even that was like 63 quid as well. So it's just so expensive. But yeah, shout out to Nike and Nets. I forgot to write this down, but the women's range that they've came out this year as well is really, really cool. There's like 4 or 5 pieces designed for women, which I really liked as well, that it wasn't just the standard male item, but just kind of brought in at the sides. They've actually done individual pieces for women. So yeah, no, it was really, really cool to see. So yeah, really nice, but yeah, I think I'll need to wait till Christmas to start buying some of that.
See if you've been a good boy.
I'm going to be kind of boring and say the white T-shirt that has all the logos on it. There's just it's not too spectacular, but it's solid. All the pieces are quite solid. If anything, I would say maybe a bit disappointed there's not more. So I think the Nets and Nike have done a really good job, and there's just 1 or 2 extra things you'd maybe like to have seen, maybe an extra sweater or 2 rather than just hoodies. But yeah, I'll go for that T-shirt. But yeah, I think Nike have absolutely smashed it.
Yeah, real cool. I mean, speaking as a man who is hopefully about to move house, I see a lot of homey stuff like the pennants and stuff, like the triangular shaped flags with Nets smashed all over it. Obviously, the whole world is working from home these days, so there's a whole Nets sort of sweatsuit that I could very, very happily get behind with the matching sliders. But yeah, I'm just all over just anything like the hoodies with the stars down the side, reminiscent of the ABA stuff. But with that kind of New Jersey, kind of Jason Kidd era reworked badge, like the old Nets badge that's on the angle, but instead of the basketball, it's got the B basketball Brooklyn Nets logo. I mean, it's all just an absolute slam dunk, isn't it? It's like, pardon the pun, but it's just all an absolute killer. So yeah, I think there's going to be lots and lots of Nets fans who are going to be, chalking that one up. I know they kind of do it as the season starts, but there's got to be a lot of people that are conscious that the NBA releases all these jerseys with one eye on Christmas. But yeah, I'm sure they're going to absolutely rake it in. But yeah, we couldn't start off this podcast without talking about this. So yeah, real nice to see some absolutely gorgeous merch, because there's some people around the league that it's pretty boring, or it's very samey, or it's just not very nice to, once you get it off the court, it's not great. But yeah, it's nice to have something that you can actually bowl about a normal life in and still look mint. But saying that, that's kind of all the stuff. I'm itching to talk about the on-court stuff. As it stands, the Nets are currently 10-4 record-wise, which is really, one of the few teams to crack double-digit wins as we speak. We are currently sitting pretty first in the Atlantic Division and second in the Eastern Conference, behind, I think, the Wizards still are the first, which is crazy, but there we are. I'm sure that'll revert to the mean soon enough. But we're going to recap and go all the way back to Monday morning, 1 a.m. UK time, game 11 of the season again, and we went to Chicago to face a very, very feisty Bulls team. And unfortunately, we got not battered, but we didn't come away. We came away with a big fat L. We lost 95-118. But we're going to start with something positive, aren't we, Cammy?
Yeah, I mean, before saying the something positive, I was very concerned that my 4-0 prediction for the week was out the window immediately. Thankfully, the Nets kind of pulled through and we finished the week 3-1. But yeah, losing the first game wasn't ideal. The positive for me was KD and LaMarcus Aldridge. It was probably the only positive we did have. KD had a monstrous 38 points. Aldridge had 19 himself, and that's 57 of our 95 points between them. Now, quick maths in my head tells me that's what, 38 points spread out between the other 10 players that played on the night, an average of 3.8 points, and this is where things get negative. That it's just not good enough. Yes, James Harden broke double digits, but I don't actually think anyone else did in the team. Joe Harris was kind of there or thereabouts. But when you're wanting to win games, especially against these good teams, you can't be having guys averaging kind of 3.8 points outside of your kind of one or two main scorers. It was just, a very disappointing way to start the week. But KD balling out as per usual was always a delight. And unfortunately, like we've seen a number of times already this season, despite a record, KD is the man that carries this team. And no matter how hard he tries, sometimes it's just not good enough. And to me, that should be a real wake-up call for the rest of the team that they need to step up in games like this.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those games where the Nets just never really got going, and it seems to happen if we go for a stretch of some really good performances that they do have nights like this where they just don't turn up really. I mean, KD's turned up every minute that he's been on the court this year, but apart from him, there's kind of always been moments where the other guys have had poor nights. But just kind of do my research on this one. I always find it quite interesting looking into losses because we talk about wins so often. Usually it's like one of us talks about KD, someone talks about James Harden, so it's quite fun to actually go into losses. I don't enjoy losing, by the way, but in terms of like reporting, it's quite interesting to see what went wrong. And obviously, this was our fourth loss of the season. Other losses so far were the Bucks, Hornets, and Heat. So that's four teams that are likely going to be in or around the playoffs, and we're probably likely to face one of them, potentially two of them at the end of the year. And I don't actually think it's been talked about too much, but the East is stacked this year, and there's going to be some really tough contests in the playoff next year. And I just think that there's going to be some really, really tough games. And I think the Bulls showed in this one that they're one of those teams that you don't really want to meet come April time, kind of in the first round, second round. Obviously, DeRozan, 28 points, Levine, 24 points. I mean, that's a really solid 1-2 punch that either one of them could go off at any time. They're both quite consistent players. So, I mean, there's 50 points right there. So if you're having a poor scoring night, the Bulls are a team that can come in and make up those scoring numbers and take those wins. And then they've obviously got other guys like Lonzo Ball and Vooch as well. So they're going to do well this year. I mean, would I want to see the Nets play them in the playoffs? They probably wouldn't be one of my first preferences. And I can't see a team like the Bulls beating the Nets in 4 games over a series. If you put it like that, I mean, I'd still be confident. But it's not as comfortable as I probably thought at the start of the year against these teams that maybe be making like kind of 6, 7, 8 spots. So yeah, it's just kind of a bit of a wake-up call early on to show that, as Cammy says, other guys are going to need to step up in these games. That it can't just be the Kevin Durant show with a little bit of LaMarcus Aldridge. Everyone's going to need to step up to beat these teams. And the East is certainly better than the West now. I know it was West dominant for a long time, but teams like the Bulls and the Hornets are looking really, really good. So, yeah, I'm not as confident as I was, but it's good to see the East doing a bit better than it was after a few years ago.
Yeah, I know what you mean, where it's like we don't enjoy the losses, but sometimes it's nice to get humbled a bit and stuff like that, just to keep you on your toes. But yeah, it was just it was tough to see that 5-game win streak that we had going into this game be, annihilated. Obviously, I think the Bulls have been killing it this season anyway. They've had a really nice kind of opener in terms of this campaign. But it just seems to be now the Nets didn't make this excuse, and I'm trying not to make this excuse to why we lost, but it was the second half of a back-to-back, and I think that showed the more this game went on. Obviously, the Bulls are a young team, as we've said. Normally, we're used to seeing Vooch light us up and have his way with us. He didn't quite have the game he normally has against the Nets, but as you touched on, it's if you've got DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine pouring in the points, it doesn't really matter. Vooch can have an off game. But it was that fourth quarter where it wasn't so much the Nets took their foot off the gas. I think it was the fact that there was no more gas left in the tank. The Bulls outscored the Nets 42 points to 17 in the fourth quarter to go from being down 2 points at the end of the third to beating us by 23, which, is a heck of a swing. And like I sort of touched on, Steve Nash didn't, blame it on the fact that it's a back-to-back. He was pretty unapologetic, and he just said, we didn't live up to our standards. We didn't play well, didn't create enough opportunities to get into the paint, and they were more physical than us, which I think is nice to see. And, we're still, not that the jury's still out, but we're still learning who Steve Nash is as a head coach, I think. So it's nice to see him kind of, not take the easy kind of excuses for why his team didn't win. And he's kind of challenging his team. And that's just a really nice thing to see. The Bulls are actually, one thing I noticed was the Bulls, we've kind of touched on them being a young team, but it feels like a bit of a Hornets situation where they're such a young, quick team that for every missed shot, they just immediately get the rebound and they're down the other end of the floor and making you pay, really. And that kind of was exacerbated by the fact that the Nets were going nowhere near the paint. So we were getting further and further away from the basket and chucking up these long-range shots where, they've got no nets round to contest the rebound, and the rebounds go long, and, it's an easy another possession for the Bulls. And they were making us pay. So yeah, it was just a lot of easy points for the Bulls, or they made it look easy. And it's one of those, KD and Harden started the fourth on the bench. And that's another one of those things where you look at Steve Nash and you, obviously hindsight's 2020, but you wonder, is that the right decision? I'm going to touch on it a little bit later in some more games, but it's just one of those where, should you stagger those minutes a bit more? I know there's only so many minutes to go round, and I know you can't, like you said, Aidan, we can't rely on these guys to dig us out of absolutely every hole. But it's just, one, if the stats are looking at you in the face and saying, when these guys aren't on, we're letting people back in the game. And then all of a sudden you got to dust them off and get them back to the rescue again. So that's something I noticed. I'm sure it won't be the last time we have to be fair, I know it's not going to be the last time we speak about this, because I'm going to talk about it for the Pelicans game. But yeah, this was also the game that KD picked up what I think was a shoulder knock that's sort of been bothering him this week. I don't know if you guys have picked up on that as well. He just doesn't seem, not that it's affected his game whatsoever. He's still absolutely mustard, but he's kind of had that kind of nagging shoulder injury. So hopefully that's going to get a bit of rest, and we're going to get it back home, back to Brooklyn, have our home medical staff, and he can rest up and get that feeling right. But I think if you're going to choose a team to make a bounce back statement win against, you're going to want it to be one of the not as good teams in the league. Fortunately, The next game we had was against the Orlando Magic. So that was the perfect opponent at the perfect time. And the Nets absolutely battered them. 100 winning the game on Wednesday, 123-90. And Aidan, we want to talk about the Bulldog.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to give guys like Javon Carter a shout out when he has a good game, because obviously we've always said it, we're as quick to praise people as we are to slate them, so it's only fair. And yeah, his best score tonight is a net so far, hitting double figures for the first time, 10, but I mean, it's a start. And he also had 3 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal. But I mean, yeah, he had 6 points coming off of 2 threes, so that's a good start line for a guy like Javon Carter, because we know what he's there to do. He's there to come in there and be that absolute dog on defense, which he has been doing. But personally, I have been slightly underwhelmed with him defensively at times. So I've always hoped that he'd pick up the offensive game just a little bit. I mean, Steve Nash seems to absolutely love him, because I'd say there's probably 90% of the fan base are kind of scratching their head as to why he is getting those minutes in there when someone like Cam Thomas, who is a walking bucket, can't get any minutes at all. And there is an argument there, but Nash and more importantly, Kevin Durant seems to love what he brings to the team. And I mean, if Kevin Durant's happy, then I'm happy at the end of the day, because no one knows basketball in my eyes better than that guy at the moment. So, and I think depending if Joe Harris sees some time out with his ankle, obviously we're still waiting on a solid update on what's going on there. I think it's been announced that he's out tomorrow against the Warriors, but who knows how long he may be out with something like that. Hopefully not too long, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Javon Carter be that guy that picks up a lot of those minutes. We've already seen him coming into the starting lineup, I think once or twice this year so far. And personally, I don't see Javon Carter being in the rotation if Kyrie Irving's in there. I think he's that guy that's benefited the most. But yeah, he's put up a good game there. It's not really what he does, but if he can do that more often, then it's a huge boost, because there's so much pressure on Patty Mills and LaMarcus Aldridge off the bench, scoring wise. And if guys like Javon Carter, Joandre Barembe, I've just completely minced his name there, but yeah, if they can come in and get,
it's fine.
if we can get say 10 points a game, then we're laughing. So yeah, good to see him pick up a good night against some poor opposition.
Yeah, I think Theo in the chat has pretty much banged it nail on the head. He says, does Javon's lack of offensive contribution outweigh his not as good as expected defense? I think, yeah, it's almost like you can paint yourself into a bit of a corner when like you're coming in under a bit of fanfare being like, oh, this guy, he's all about defense. And if your defense is all right, then you kind of got to be delivering in other places as well, I think. But yeah, again, it's super early in the season and all that good stuff, and we shall see. But yeah, another new addition, another bench piece that has come into Brooklyn this season was a certain DeAndre Bembry. And Cammy, I believe you've got a little bit to say about him.
I do indeed. This is the 3-point assassin who's been sitting in the wings that we didn't know we had. He's shooting 70% from free. Yes, 70% from free from the season. I'm going to get absolutely carried away and just completely ignore the fact he's averaging less than 1 3-point attempt a game. But that's besides the point.
Doesn't matter.
He is. I mean, you can only score the shots you take. You can't score shots you don't take. He's kind of averaged 1 or 2 threes most games. He's kind of come on or none at all. He's been kind of one of those players, but in this one, 3 from 3, and I don't think this was something any of us were really expecting. But yeah, it was a very solid evening for Bembry. 11 points off the bench, and if he can kind of get quite consistent from 3 and deliver on a regular basis, then we're going to be laughing, because it's yet another 3-point shooter in this team. There's Joe Harris, who's one of the league's best, but to have Bembry, who I don't think anyone would have really hyped up his 3-point shot, actually delivering off the bench quite quietly, just getting away, popping on, it's impressive. And considering he is on the bench, he's one of the guys fighting 4 minutes, to be chancing your luck with a 3, which is probably a less kind of high percentage shot than a then you're kind of 2-point short or kind of one right at the basket. When you really need to land every bucket you can to try and up your minutes to be even chancing it from free in the kind of position he's in, it's great. And yeah, that's the kind of thing you want to see from this team. You want guys to challenge themselves. I don't think anyone could be too upset if Bembry started taking a few more frees, if it meant he was, especially if they were good looks. But the second he starts just chucking them up for the sake of it, I think there will be people upset. But long may this streak of 70% from free continue, because that's scary shooting.
Love that. Just the king of Bembry Island. I love that. We're going to keep it on. You know, just absolute positivity all the way. Yeah, I think he's almost like the absolute. If you could make a 3-and-D guy in a lab, it'd almost be DeAndre Bembry with his. You know, he's made jokes about being that kind of I was going to say he's made jokes about being that Energizer Bunny, but that was Bruce Brown. So that's good company to be in, anyway, at least. But yeah, we've said it already that all we talk about is how good KD is, but this game, particularly, even by KD's lofty standards, was another absolute peach of a game. KD finishing with 30 points on 11 of 12 shooting. So MVP KD watch is still going strong. This was his 6th game of the season, scoring 30 points or more. And it was only the 12th game of the season. So he's scoring 30 points or more every other game. Yeah, ridiculous 11 of 12 from the field, 2 of 2 from deep. He only needed to play 29 minutes in this one. Normally he's up kind of hovering around 30, 35. It's one of those, I know that Orlando are bad. And even by their standards, they played badly. They turned over a lot and they didn't shoot well. But KD, like Thanos, is inevitable. So he's just an absolute machine. And yeah, I couldn't sort of let this game recap pass by without chatting about KD, because he was absolutely mint. But the road trip rolls on, and that took us to game 13 of the season against the Pelicans on Friday. And another not as easy as it could have been. Obviously, the Pelicans, who themselves have been sort of struggling for wins this year. Yeah, it could have been a different result, but the Nets did win 120-112. And you know, carrying on the tradition that we're setting out this episode of starting with the really, really good stuff. Cammy, I believe that you got something to say about turnovers, which is nice.
Yes, so we are now actually pretty good at capitalizing on turnovers from the opposition. This is something that has plagued us for years, and it always seems like we get battered on turnovers. We always give up turnovers, and teams always seem to get near enough maximum points off the turnovers. But this was our turn to kind of give a beat down on a team giving the ball up. 26 points off of turnovers in this one, almost a fifth of our points. You can't really argue with a kind of tally like that. It's very, very clinical. And I'd done some digging over the kind of final 3 games of this road trip, including the Thunder game, which we'll go on to. We lead the NBA in points off of turnovers with 17 per game. So considering it's usually something we're moaning about and teams beating us, it's nice to actually see us doing well in this metric. And obviously, those 26 points off of turnovers helped us to a win that should have probably been a lot more comfortable than it ultimately was.
Love that.
That was fit for Michael Grady's. I did not know that, wasn't it? No, that I actually did not know that. That's a hell of a fact. Yeah, what a turnaround. We must have been near the bottom as well last year as well. So
must have been, yeah.
No, nice stat. No, I was just gonna talk about, it was just really nice to see our 3-pointers going down for our scorers in this one. It was just one of those nights where they really did need to go down, because the Pelicans were really, really good at just packing the paint and making it difficult, and that was without Zion Williamson. So yeah, no, they are quite good defensively when they want to be, the Pelicans, but they just made it really difficult for anyone to score inside that wasn't called Kevin Durant. So I mean, KD just continued his outstanding efficiency. Obviously, he only took three 3-point attempts, but he scored all three, so 100%. James Harden was 6 from 10, which again was really good, and obviously he had his clutch threes in the fourth to take the W. Joe Harris again went 6 from 8 with just exactly the numbers that you want from Joe from 3. I mean, you can't expect him to get 6 threes every night. Klay Thompson doesn't always get 6 threes every night, but if he can come up with that every other game or so, then yeah, he just solidifies again as himself as one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. But what I found interesting with Kevin Durant is I think he's had a few nights already where he's maybe taken 3 and he scored all 3 from 3. And it just makes you wonder, why does he not take more? But then you watch his game and you just see how high his IQ is, that when he's coming up the court, especially when he has the ball, he's already analysing where his most probable shots are so early on in the possession. You just see him looking at different areas and he already knows exactly where he's going to go. But yeah, it just blows my mind every single time. And you can tell now when he's just going to pull up from 3, and it feels like he's just 100% on those at the moment. So it's just incredible to watch every single night. But yeah, just fantastic performance overall, especially from our 3 go-to guys who just seem to be playing really, really well at the moment, which is great to see.
It's yeah, I keep saying it. It's just a nice time to be a Nets fan, man. Like, it gets to a stage where you are shocked when we start like missing, innit? Which is a really strange position to be in. But yeah, it's just a testament to our efficiency. But it is another one of those that nearly got away. But Brooklyn led by as many as 21 before the Pels came all the way back and made it a bit more closer than it had to be going into the final minute. I think it was like down to 1 possession even. So like just literally a couple of points in it. But I always like to listen to although it's late, I always do like to listen to the post-game media stuff that comes out afterwards. And it was the 3rd game that we've looked back on this week where the sort of the quotes were centered around taking our foot off the gas. And I'm not quite sure. I haven't even sort of analyzed this. This is more just like thinking out loud. Like, I don't know what you do to remedy that in terms of sort of taking your foot off the gas. Maybe it's the travel, maybe it's, heading up from Toronto to Chicago to New Orleans to all this kind of stuff. You're all over the shop, but I don't know if it's mental fatigue or physical fatigue or what it is. But it's another one where KD and Harden, when they were on the bench, it was just a real big drop off. And that's when the teams tend to get back in touching distance. But yeah, I think this is maybe something that I'm going to try and pay a bit more attention to. When KD and Harden are sitting, there's got to be there's some clever bloke will have the metrics somewhere where KD and Harden are off the floor, what our sort of net rating is, but it can't be good because it's our one Achilles heel. You take the 2 superstars away and we look beatable, which isn't great, but fortunately for the vast majority of the games, we have got one of those in. But we got the win, which is the most important thing. And it was time to round out the road trip on Sunday, just gone the 14th, midnight UK time. And it was a very, very comfortable one in the end. The Nets going to Oklahoma City, where it was the first time that Kevin Durant and James Harden returned to there as teammates. KD getting cheered, Harden getting booed for some reason, and even Harden was like, I got traded away. I don't know what you're talking to me about, but a pretty rounded performance. I thought. I watched it back today, and it just felt pretty good. Like, it just not a lot really jumped out, but it was just an all round good performance. Aidan, you wanted to chat about our defense.
Yeah, James Harden was touching on it last night when he was talking after the game about how impressed he's been with how we've been defensively. And I think in this one, personally, it was something that I paid attention to more than I have, maybe more so than other games. I mean, you've seen the stats floating around. I mean, you've seen some lists where we're top 5 defensive efficiency, we're top 10 overall defense, and we mentioned it very quickly last week, but I feel that it is something that we need to talk about because we're so used to being so poor defensively. But just from watching that one, I watched it back today, and we just looked really, really solid. And I know we're playing against OKC, but they've obviously got scorers in their team, young, kind of feisty scorers, who's obviously already beat the Lakers twice this year already with scoring high points. So we seem to just do a really good job defending on man and just getting out to guys in the 3-point line. Obviously, that was a real issue last year, kind of leaving guys open from three. And we just seem to be a lot quicker. You've got guys getting out to the person who's about to shoot and they're kind of yelling in their face. It's just that kind of dogged defence that kind of comes when you've got guys like, say, Patty Mills and Bruce Brown in your team. And shout out to those guys in particular. I think in terms of being active, especially kind of having active hands in the paint, Patty Mills, Bruce Brown, and even James Harden have been really, really good so far this year. And a shout out to LaMarcus Aldridge as well, who had 2 just monster blocks in this one. And he was on fire last night. He just seemed to be, everything he touched seemed to go to goal. And he had a beautiful spin move into a dunk as well, which was the highlight of the game for me. So yeah, just love seeing the guys doing the dirty work, and it just seems to make nights when the ball isn't falling, like a couple of nights ago, obviously against the Bulls, just so much more winnable if they're putting in the effort at that end. And we've already had some games this year where we've maybe won like 96-90 and things, where in the past we'd maybe lose those ones because teams would end up getting 110 points on us. But there has been an extra effort there, and it's great to see, and that's definitely the recruitment. So fair play to the guys at the top.
Yeah, we've definitely got that kind of defensive mentality starting to establish, which is really, really good. Cammy, did you wanna chat about Patty Mills, or shall I touch on the injury that we spotted?
I'll let you touch on the sad news before I end on the positive.
No, that's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. So watching back this morning, it's a good thing that I didn't watch it live because I don't think I would have slept. But our boy Joe Harris, longest tenured net on the team, reminiscent of Giannis's assault of Kyrie Irving in the playoffs last time. He kind of landed a bit dodgy, rolled on his ankle, and he left the game after 14 minutes. Looks like he rolled his ankle. He's going to be further evaluated when the team gets back to Brooklyn. So probably, it's 20 to 11 p.m. UK time. So they're probably in Brooklyn as we speak. But Steve Nash referred to the injury as a little ankle sprain, like super cash. But you guys have sort of touched on it, that it looks like he's probably out against the Warriors. And yeah, we're gonna chat a little bit about Joe in a minute. But yeah, it just seems like a bit horrible time. And as you kind of saying, Aidan, about Joe kind of finally hitting his stride. He's had a slow start to the season, but it kind of, that 6 of 8 game, it kind of looked like vintage Joe. So hopefully it's a speedy recovery. But as you say, it's got we've just got no information, so we're going to have to wait and see on that one. But fortunately, we've got a couple of people to step into the breach.
We do indeed, and we're no longer referring to him as Patty Mills, but rather Patty Frills. This was phenomenal. 29 points, 10 from 16 from the field, and the craziest thing was he was 9 from 12 from free. An absolutely lights-out performance from behind the arc from everyone's favourite Aussie. And with the kind of news of Joe going down, this was the performance we needed from someone. We needed someone to step up and kind of make up the points we would have otherwise got from Joe, that Joe and Patty may have eventually split. We knew Patty was capable of shooting from the free, shooting 9 from 12 from free. Yeah, I don't think many would have expected him to have done that many times, if any, this season, but it just shows you what he's capable of and makes me feel a little bit better about Joe Harris being out, knowing that Patty Mills can step up and be that kind of main 3-point marksman in the team when Joe's not there. And ultimately, when Joe comes back, there's going to be that much attention on Patty Mills as well. It might actually help Joe's return, depending on how long he's out. Lets him build himself back up, and that's going to ultimately spread the flow that bit further, which is going to just benefit the entire team. So long live Patty Frills. That was phenomenal.
Love that. He's obviously the successful application to the Blue Collar Boys Club has not gone to his head. He's still all finesse as well when he needs to be. He's not all about doing the grunt work. But But yeah, absolutely incredible. Obviously, he had his debut. He went 7 from 7 from 3, so he's an absolute elite 3-level 3-point shooter. So yeah, absolutely beautiful. But that does lead us nicely into our first listener question of the week, which comes from our good friend of the pod, Elliot Wade from Hoopin' and Luton, who's just released an app. A smartphone app for if you want any jerseys, NBA jerseys, then download his app. It looks absolutely beautiful and support small businesses. But on Joe Harris, he says, Joe Harris has had 5 shots in 25 minutes. This was just after the Orlando game, I believe. He says, he's a shooter. Are we not better off concentrating him on playing with the second unit as a dangerous weapon if he's not being utilized in the starting 5? I just wanted to put my quick thoughts out there because I think it's one of those where I'm very quick to defend Joe. Obviously, because he's been part of the furniture for so long. Historically, one of the league's best shooters, but he's kind of not been declining, but his volume hasn't been there. So I had a look on the stats, and he's currently averaging, let me get it up in front of me. He's currently averaging, ball bags, my laptop's just decided to freeze. There we are. He's currently averaging 6.3 3-pointers attempted a game this season. That's basically exactly the same as he did last season, 6.4 3-pointers attempted. The season before that was even less, and before that was even less. So although your eyes are telling you he's not putting up the shots, he's kind of in line where he's been sort of in terms of 3-pointers attempted, where we've been the trajectory going out. He's not getting to the basket as much, so his 2-point field goals have actually gone down. Last season he was shooting 10.2 field goal attempts a game. The season before that was 11.4, and this season he's gone down to 8.9. So the one thing I will say is that obviously the last couple of years we've been kind of a bit rocked by injury and stuff like that, where Joe Harris has had to do different roles than he would have to be. He gets bumped up the pecking order. So maybe now we've got KD and Harden being the nailed on number 1 and number 2. Maybe that third option is turning out to be LaMarcus Aldridge, or it's turning out to be Patty Mills if he's hot. So I think it is just a case of, yes, I'd love to see Joe getting off shots, but I think you can have a look at the Nets' efficiency and you can see that we're just making the right decisions about who's going to be taking the shots. So I think, yes, I would love to see him shoot more. Obviously, we've been really, really consistent with our starting 5 especially over this last road trip. And I think it was, we've sort of touched on, it's been this same starting 5 for a while. But yeah, I mean, maybe moving him to the second unit is something we can play with. But at 10 and 4, I'm sort of thinking if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think you've nailed it. It's the case of it's a winning formula at the moment. There's no point in really changing things. I mean, the only time that I'd potentially change things again is maybe against games like an OKC or Orlando, where you can see what you've got and maybe change it then. But there's not really much point. And the main issue we had last year was consistency with the lineup that we had in the court. So I don't see why we should be changing that now. I mean, we can get all our guys in the same team playing constantly. So when we get to the playoffs, we're not having to chuck together a starting 5 that we've never played together before. So I don't have an issue with it. And I think Joe's still a starter in my eyes, just purely because this is what Brooklyn have always done. They've always had a 3-pointer there, ever since they've obviously brought in their big 3 and now obviously the big 2, is because KD and James Harden, they go in isolation so often where they sometimes run down the clock and there's only maybe 4 or 5 seconds left. So say they're getting surrounded by 2 or 3 guys. You always want to have a guy like Joe Harris there who can is a reliable 3-point shooter, because at the end of the day, it's more than likely going to be a 3-point shot that shot's going to be. So I still think he has to be in there. And I think as long as you've got LaMarcus Aldridge and Patty Mills on that bench, if they weren't there, potentially then I would see an argument for bringing a shooter like Joe down, just so you've got someone there who can score in those minutes. But because he's not a ball handler as well, you want him to be in that starting lineup where he can just spot up and shoot. So I don't have an issue with him being in there, and I've slated Joe quite a lot this year already, but I still believe that he should be in that starting lineup, just because it's just the way the Nets have always done things, and it's just how it works. So we have seen minutes of Joe potentially coming into the second unit at times. We saw a couple of times this year where Nash has pulled him early in the first quarter so that he can start the second quarter with those guys. So they do have that flexibility. But in terms of playing with Harden and Durant, I think Harris is the right guy to have in there as the third option at the moment.
I'm in complete agreement with the pair of you. And although, like you say, Matt, it would appear he's not taking as many shots, although the stats certainly don't back that up. I think you've also got to bear in mind just the pulling power Harris has. He's maybe not getting the shots up, but just pulling the defender away to like KD or Harden have a shot, that's a bucket in itself, whether it's Joe taking that shot or not. Does that same kind of pulling factor exist if it's Patty Mills in that position or Bruce Brown or what have you? Probably not. Patty Mills to a bit of a lesser extent, but I think Harris, it'll be interesting to see, depending on how long he's out, what happens with the starting five. You might then actually come to appreciate Harris a bit more. I think we now need to just accept Harris is one of those elite 3-point shooters, but he's so inconsistent. You'll get a fantastic game from him, then you need to wait 2 or 3 games again. And to be fair, there were spells last season where it seemed to be 5, 6, 7 games in between lights out Joe. But I mean, like you have both said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens if he's out long term.
It's one of those. I think it all goes back to his contract that he's just got. I think you start paying people more money, you expect more production on the box score and taking those shots. Well, so I agree sort of on one hand with what I think Elliot is trying to get. And I know he's not having a dig. It's just kind of sort of holding people accountable. If he's, I just want to see he's not being utilized in the starting five. I think I agree with you, Cam. He is being utilized because of that gravity. And yeah, he was driving a bit more. He was cutting a bit more last season, but maybe, after the playoffs, they're just telling him, no, just don't overcomplicate things. Save your energy so you're not gassed and you can hit those open threes when they come, because they will come. So just stand there and be mint at shooting threes. And I think if we look at what he's shooting from free at the moment this season, is still basically 44%, which isn't Joe Harris standard yet, but is still not bad. So yeah, he's doing all right. Thanks as ever for your question, Elliot. Much appreciated. Brings us on to our next listener question. This is from Sam Pretense. So I hope I've obviously just butchered your name, mate, but so sorry about that. But I do appreciate the question again. He says, is this the best version of KD we've seen since he's been in the league? The guy is unplayable. Hang on, sorry. I've lost it. Where's it gone? The guy is unplayable. Golden State KD was unbelievable, but this year is different gravy. I'll let you guys, I've waxed lyrical enough about KD over the past 45 minutes. I'll let one of you guys start on this.
I'll come in here. Short answer, yes. I mean, I think it's really hard to argue. Yes, he's not led us to a championship yet, and I think that's what kind of the basketball purists, kind of stats people will maybe say, because if you don't win championship, nothing counts in the eyes of many people. I think if he does lead us to the championship, it's there's no doubt about it. But certainly, regular season, I don't think there can be any debate. Like you brought up that stat earlier on, Matt, he's 30 odd points every other game, which is obscene. And we're going to always refer back to that injury. That injury would have finished so many players, would have set them back, would have just seen them kind of just fall off a cliff. Yet KD somehow has got better. And I don't know how, because
that makes sense.
obviously you have that injury, but he's getting much older as well. And surely you'd decline at that stage. I know we're seeing LaMarcus Aldridge do great at his age, and these are elite players, but you'd still think he would have lost something, but he's not. This is just KD in full flow, and what that's down to, I've no idea. But it's happening in a Brooklyn Nets uniform, and that's all I really care about.
Yeah, again, obviously, where Matt pulled out the receipts on the Joe Harris numbers there, you can pull out your receipts on KD and look back to his Oklahoma days where he won a scoring title, he won an MVP, and he's getting those numbers again right now. And there'll be plenty of people that would argue that he's potentially past his peak age of an NBA player. He's maybe a couple of years past it. But no, not for Kevin Durant. He is certainly in his peak right now. And for me, is definitely probably the most rounded we've seen Kevin Durant as a player. Because obviously we've seen Kevin Durant as a scorer, as a pure scorer, the best scorer of all time, people say, which I agree with. But he's been dominating in other factors as well. Some of his assists and rebounds have been fantastic this year, and the numbers back that up as well. So, as Cammy said, he's coming off the back of an injury that's ruined so many careers, and he's came back from it almost unhuman-like, just with how well he's recovered, almost like he's been taken into a lab. And he's kind of almost like a Frankenstein return where they've just made him even better. But yeah, Sam made a great point. Golden State KD was incredible, but he's en route to a historic year this year. And if he wins the championship, could go down as one of the best years that a player's ever had in the NBA.
Yeah, I think someone made the case that he isn't possibly looking as explosive defensively, but, you know, I think he's still, in terms of offensive output, then he's still absolutely brilliant. So it's not, yeah, like you say, I'm just so happy it's happening in a Brooklyn Nets uniform. But gents, we're nearly out of here. All that's left to do is to look ahead. So after a long road trip, we're back in the Clees to take on KD's former team, the Golden State Warriors, on Wednesday at 12:30 a.m. UK time. Before the following night, we welcome the Cavaliers and the Jarrett Allen return game, also at 12:30. Before a couple of days off, when we are going back to, well, we are hosting the Magic, who obviously we spoke about earlier on in this episode, on Saturday the 20th, also at 12:30. One thing that I sort of noticed about the Warriors, who are obviously one of the few teams that have got a better record than the Nets this season, is they've spent most of this season at home. So I don't know if you've seen it, but I think most of their games have been either literally in their home arena or they've not gone out of state, which might be something to do with how good their season's going. But between the Warriors, the Cavs, and the Magic, how do you see this week going?
Personally, I think that could be a potential 2022 finals preview against the Warriors. And I know what you're saying, Matt, because I did have a look into their schedule, and they've had quite a kind schedule so far. And there's certainly going to be a dip off at some point, especially when you think that they're not actually at full strength yet at the moment. I think Klay Thompson's still got about 5 or 6 weeks to come back. So it's quite nice that we get to face the Warriors in one of our 2 games against them in the regular season when they don't have Klay Thompson back, because they are very scary when he plays. But yeah, I do think that this could be a potential finals preview, and it's probably the hottest ticket in the NBA this week. Obviously, Steph and KD both won Players of the Week in the Eastern and Western conferences, which is a very fun time to see these 2 guys in such good form at the moment, going head to head. And obviously they've played together, so I reckon it's going to be a really fun watch tomorrow night. Aside from that, I mean, that's definitely the blockbuster of the week. The Cavs and the Magic are another 2 kind of young teams. Obviously, we've seen the Magic already, but they're 2 young teams with great players. And I'm just really excited to see Jarrett Allen for the first time this year, because I've not seen him. I've actually not watched the Cavs game yet. And if the box scores are anything to go by, it seems that he's taken another massive leap. So congratulations to him and look
shooting
forward
threes. I can't believe it. He's shooting threes. Imagine
seems
having
that
him
players
still.
they just seem to do that when they leave the nets. They just seem to find a free ball. But yeah, 2 beatable teams and 2 teams that shouldn't be taking W's off of this Nets team. So personally, I think we'll clean sweep it this week, and I think it could go either way tomorrow night. But I can just see the Nets edging it, so I'm pretty confident that we can do well.
I'm going to go for another clean sweep as well. This week is certainly much harder than last week, which was probably one of the easiest weeks of the season. We'll have the loss against the Bulls aside. We just had a few very kind fixtures kind of back to back to back, and let us kind of carry on our fine start to the season. Now, the Warriors and the Cavs have both started really well. The Warriors are sitting at the top of the West. The Cavs are sitting, 3rd or 4th in the East, kind of not too far behind us. And the Magic, well, we've already played them. We know they're pretty bad. So we should be beating them. We've already beaten them well already. So there shouldn't really be any questions asked with that. There shouldn't be any surprises there. The Warriors and Cavs, they'll be tough games. There's no doubts about that. And I know we're only early in the season. We've not even had a quarter of the season gone yet. But this is a chance for us to really, really put down a marker. And we'll see that tons throughout the season, I'd imagine. But if you can beat the leaders in the West who, based on current standings, you'd be facing in the playoff finals potentially, and in the Cavs who we might face early rounds of the playoffs, well, if these are teams you can beat now, it certainly bodes well for later. I just hope that we can finish the week 13-4 and kind of approach the kind of conclusion of the first quarter. No more injuries and just carrying on that kind of good form we've had. So fingers crossed for another clean sweep.
Yeah, I think I'm with you guys. Three wins would be absolutely lovely to round this week off. I think there would be no shame losing to this Warriors team. They're a very, very good team, but at the same time, I still think we've got enough in the tank to beat them. The Cavs sort of throw up a similar sort of challenge like the Hornets did and like the Bulls did, where they're just a young, capable team, it seems like. So it feels like one of those ones where it might be one of those that we just we let them stay near and we don't kind of really put the boot in where we possibly could be. So obviously Ricky Rubio has had his performances as well off the bench for them. And they're just a good team. I think they're quite a big team as well. So it'll be interesting. We chatting about the rebound numbers and stuff like that to see how we fare against those. But in the state of the BK to UK pick'em this season, we're keeping a running total of all our win predictions. Each of us will guess who wins, and the winners and losers of each week. Every game we get right, we get a point. As it stands, Aidan is still creeping ahead. He's on 12. I'm on 10, and Cammy just behind me on 9. So if we're all guessing 3 wins, that's not going to change too much, but we got to stay true. We're not here to create controversy and manufacture tension between us. So we're going to stay true to what we believe in. But on that bombshell, I think that's pretty much it. That's about all we have time for. Thanks to Aidan and Cammy as ever, and thanks for you guys for listening along, watching us on YouTube, jumping in the chat. It's been a lot of fun. If you like what we do, then the best thing you can do is like, rate, review the podcast wherever you're listening to it. Subscribe to us on YouTube and share the episode on social media. Any chance that we can get to grow our audience is something we really, really want to do and reach more of Nets World. You can also support us by treating yourself to a bit of merch, which you'll find the link of that in our Twitter description. Get yourself a Blue Collar Boys t-shirt. We've even got some classic throwback inspired colorways of the UK Nets fans logo. But as I say, that's it. We'll see you next week for another episode, and take it easy.